Paul Heyman thought he was safe, but Roman Reigns doesn't forgive, and he definitely doesn't forget. After months off the grid, no signs, no tweets, no warnings, the tribal chief returned to WWE in the most savage way possible. Fans expected fireworks, they got a massacre. No entrance music. No smiles. Just rage. Roman walked in like a storm, and Paul Heyman? He was the lightning rod. 1 minute he was pleading. The next, he was flat on his back, broken by the very man he once called the head of the table. This wasn't a reunion. This was a reckoning. And if this is just the beginning, the bloodline might bleed from the inside out. On a night where the WWE Universe expected pageantry, maybe a tease, maybe a small glimpse of the tribal chief on the Titantron, they got something else. A seismic shift. An unscripted roar that never needed words. Because when Roman Reigns walked out, without theme music, without lights, without a single damn warning, it wasn't nostalgia that came with him. It was war. On the June 7th episode of WWE SmackDown, taped live from Philadelphia's Wells Fargo Center, something happened that wasn't on the official run sheet. No insiders knew. No dirt sheets leaked it. The cameras weren't ready, and the crowd wasn't prepared. But Roman Reigns, gone from WWE for nearly 6 months, returned. Not as a champion. Not as a savior. Not even as the head of the table we remembered. He returned as something else entirely. And he walked straight through the backstage curtain, past stunned staff, through the ring ropes, and into the eye of the storm. His eyes fixed on one man. Not Jimmy. Not Solo. Not even Cody Rhodes or Seth Rollins. He locked onto Paul Heyman, his wise man, his voice, his architect, and unleashed something brutal. Visceral. Biblical. Let's back up. Roman Reigns hadn't been seen on WWE television since the fallout of WrestleMania 40, where his bloodline fractured, his leadership was questioned, and his aura, once godlike, began to decay in the eyes of fans. The whispers of mutiny became shouts. The empire he built from fear began to crumble in front of millions. So, he left. Without a farewell. Without a farewell tour. He simply vanished. Fans speculated wildly, was he injured? Taking time off? Negotiating with Hollywood? There were theories, sure. But answers? None. And Paul Heyman? He stayed. Week after week, mic in hand, sweat on his brow, doing what Paul Heyman does best, talking his way around the truth. He spoke for Solo Sikoa. He redirected questions about Roman. He remained loyal, or so it seemed. But here's the thing about Roman Reigns. He remembers everything. Every whisper. Every dodge. Every time Heyman hesitated to say his name, to defend him, to keep the bloodline unified in his absence. And while Paul may have been hoping, even praying, for a triumphant reunion, a handshake, a hug, a smirk, Roman had something else in mind. Because this was never about redemption. This wasn't a feel-good comeback. This was an execution. The moment felt wrong even before it went south. The lights didn't dim. The arena didn't swell with his theme. No slow-mo entrance with smoke. Just a camera cutting to the crowd mid-match, and a roar starting to rise from fans near the ramp. There he was. Black hoodie. Head down. Hair tied back. No expression. Just motion. Focused. Walking like a freight train with one destination, Paul Heyman. The ring went quiet. Commentary went silent. Even the crowd, hyped moments ago, sank into stunned murmurs. Heyman? He stood up like he saw a ghost. He tried to smile. Tried to speak. He reached out a hand, as if to say, "You're back. I knew you'd come back," but Roman didn't say a word. He didn't even blink. What happened next wasn't a fight. It was a message. Roman grabbed Heyman by the collar and slammed him into the mat so hard the ring bounced. The audience gasped, not in excitement, but in genuine shock. This wasn't a scripted beatdown. This felt personal. Targeted. Surgical. He pulled him up again. Another shot. And another. Steel steps. Ring post. Spear. Spear again. Blood on the canvas. The wise man lay broken in the ruins of his own empire. And Roman? Still no words. Just a stare into the camera, cold and clean. The why. What makes a king snap? Why Paul? That's the question that shattered across social media like glass. Why not Jimmy, who took shortcuts in Roman's absence? Why not Solo, who tried to claim leadership for himself? Why not Cody, who embarrassed the Bloodline at WrestleMania? Why go after the one man who stood by you the longest? Because betrayal hurts most when it comes from the ones who swore loyalty. Because Roman didn't come back for redemption. He came back to clean house. And Paul Heyman was first on the list. Not because he betrayed Roman with his words, but because he didn't use them when it mattered most. In the world Roman built, silence is treason. Hesitation is betrayal. And weakness? Weakness gets punished. So now we're here. The tribal chief has returned, but not as the leader of men. He's a one-man demolition unit. A king with no kingdom. A judge, jury, and executioner. And Paul Heyman? He's the first casualty in a war that's only just begun. But the bigger question isn't why now? It's, who's next? Is this just a personal vendetta? Or is Roman about to rip the Bloodline apart from the inside? Either way, if this is how he starts his return, no music, no warning, just wreckage, then what happens when he starts talking? What happens when Roman Reigns starts hunting? Stay with us. This is just the beginning. Where has Roman been? WWE doesn't do quiet. The company thrives on noise, pyro, chants, promo battles, storyline twists every week. So, when someone vanishes without explanation, especially someone like Roman Reigns, the absence isn't just noticed. It's deafening. For months, fans didn't just miss Roman, they questioned everything. Where did he go? Why did he leave? And maybe most importantly, what was he planning while the rest of WWE kept moving forward? Roman Reigns didn't tweet. He didn't go live on Instagram. He didn't show up at a press conference, a red carpet, a charity gala, or even in the crowd at UFC. His name was whispered on commentary but never spoken with certainty. There were no teasers. No return soon graphic. No rumors from sources close to the situation. Nothing. Just a clean break from the machine he once dominated. In an industry that never stops talking, Roman's silence screamed. The last time anyone saw him in a WWE ring was WrestleMania 40. That night wasn't just a defeat, it was a collapse. Cody Rhodes walked away with the title. Jimmy Uso turned inward. Solo Sikoa started moving like a man with his own agenda. And Paul Heyman? He just kept talking, trying to fill the void Roman left behind. But Roman didn't return to take his seat back. He disappeared. That absence became a storyline in itself. Fans on Reddit tracked flight paths, trying to spot him on private jets. Others shared grainy photos of a man with a bun at a resort in Hawaii. One claimed to see him at a boxing event in Vegas. All unconfirmed. All speculative. And yet every single post got engagement, because whether people loved him or hated him, everyone was asking the same thing: where the hell is Roman Reigns? Some believed it was injury. A torn muscle. A worn-down body after years of carrying the company. Others insisted he was negotiating a move to Hollywood. After all, the man had main event charisma, and the Bloodline arc had already gone cinematic. What better time to pivot than after dropping the gold? But here's the truth. If Roman wanted you to know where he was, you'd know. If he wanted to tease a return, there'd be cryptic Instagram stories, a 3-second teaser, a set of initials on a backstage locker. Instead, he gave the audience nothing. And that's how you know it wasn't for show. It wasn't a gimmick. It was personal. This wasn't a break. It was withdrawal. Deliberate. Tactical. And it wasn't just the fans who were left in the dark. People backstage started to shift. With Roman gone, the Bloodline became less of a faction and more of a rumor. Paul Heyman tried to hold it together, but you could see the panic behind his eyes. He looked less like a confident manager and more like a man stalling for time. Because without Roman, the foundation was cracking. Jimmy Uso tried to take charge. Solo Sikoa started making decisions without consulting Heyman. The younger generation of the Anoa'i family started circling like sharks, sensing blood. Titles were lost. Matches were blown. And the image of the unstoppable Bloodline started to fade. Still, no Roman. And the longer he stayed away, the louder the speculation grew. Not from WWE itself, but from the fans, the insiders, the journalists. Was this the end of the Tribal Chief era? That question hung in the air for weeks. But if you listened closely, there was always a second question riding quietly behind it. Was Roman just waiting? Because that's what a predator does. It doesn't strike when the prey is alert. It waits for weakness. For overconfidence. For complacency. And in his absence, Paul Heyman got comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. He kept his place at ringside. He still wore the suit. Still clutched the microphone like a preacher holding a Bible. He whispered into Solo's ear, tried to keep Jimmy focused, and reassured everyone, maybe even himself, that everything was fine. But it wasn't. Every promo Heyman cut without mentioning Roman's name was a red flag. Every time he dodged a question in a backstage interview, fans noticed. Every time he gave an order and Solo didn't flinch, the power dynamic shifted. Slowly. Quietly. Dangerous. Because in the world Roman created, loyalty isn't something you keep in public. It's what you do when no one is watching. And Roman was always watching. That's the part nobody thought about. Just because he wasn't in the arena didn't mean he wasn't seeing everything. Backstage segments, in-ring promos, interviews, post-match reactions, every word, every gesture, every slight. It was all recorded. All archived. All waiting to be judged. Roman doesn't need to yell. He doesn't need to tweet or tease. He doesn't beg for spotlight. He waits until everyone's guards are down. Then he moves. And when he does, it's not a conversation. It's a sentence. That's why the moment of his return hit so hard. No music. No lights. No fireworks. Just boots on concrete, walking through the crowd like a ghost returning to the place he died. You could see it in the fans' faces. That mix of disbelief and dread. He wasn't here to take back a title. He wasn't here to reform a faction. He was here for someone. And that someone was Paul Heyman. The man who stood by him for years. The man who helped him become the tribal chief. The man who delivered speech after speech about loyalty, family, dynasty. But when Roman was gone, Heyman's tone changed. Just slightly. Just enough. The hesitation. The hedging. The way he leaned into Solo, the way he let Jimmy fumble without punishment. It was subtle, but Roman saw it. He doesn't forget. And in Roman's world, there's only one form of justice. Personal. So where has Roman been? He's been watching. Waiting. Studying. Letting his silence grow into a storm. And when he returned, he didn't come back to reclaim anything. He came back to destroy. What Paul Heyman didn't realize was this: Roman didn't disappear. He was just sharpening the blade. And now that he's returned, that blade has a name. vengeance. The rest of the bloodline may think they're safe. They're not. Because Roman Reigns didn't just return to WWE. He returned to finish what he started. And Paul Heyman was only the beginning. For years, Paul Heyman wasn't just a manager. He was the voice behind the throne, the interpreter of prophecy, the man who turned Roman Reigns from a rejected babyface into the most dominant force WWE had seen in a generation. He didn't just stand beside Roman, he built the tribal chief persona word by word, promo by promo, match by match. When Roman entered his god-tier era, Heyman wasn't just his hype man. He was his priest. But now? He's the one lying in the ring, broken by the very monster he helped create. To understand how we got to this point, you have to understand Paul Heyman's role not just in Roman's rise, but in WWE's modern mythology. Heyman doesn't work for people. He partners with power. That's how he survived for decades. First with Brock Lesnar. Then with CM Punk. Eventually, with Roman Reigns. Each time he found the most dominant figure in the room, latched on, and amplified their presence. But there was something different with Roman. This wasn't business. This was religion. When Roman returned in 2020 after a brief hiatus, he didn't come back as the smiling babyface fans had seen for years. He came back sharp. Mean. Methodical. And right behind him, dressed in a black suit and crimson tie, was Paul Heyman, no longer the advocate, now the wise man. It was a signal. This wasn't a Roman Reigns reboot. This was Roman ascending to the throne. Week after week, Heyman spoke in reverence. He called Roman the head of the table, the provider, the protector. He compared him to deities. He didn't sell Roman like a product, he sold him like a prophecy. And fans bought in. Hardcore fans who once booed Roman out of arenas now chanted his name. They didn't just accept the character. They feared him, respected him. That was Heyman's work. But it came at a price. Because when you sell someone as untouchable, when you elevate them above the rest of the roster, you create something more than a superstar. You create a tyrant. Over time, Roman began to isolate himself from the world. He became more than a champion. He became an ideal. Untouchable. Unquestionable. And Heyman kept feeding it. Even when it was clear that cracks were forming, Heyman kept delivering sermons. When Jey Uso broke ranks, when Jimmy refused to fall in line, when even Solo began to move with quiet rebellion, Heyman kept acting like it was all part of the plan. But it wasn't. He wasn't controlling the chaos. He was drowning in it. After WrestleMania 40, when Roman vanished, Heyman was left behind. Not as the general. Not even as the leader. Just as the face of a broken regime. But instead of retreating, he stayed visible. He clutched his phone. He whispered in corners. He tried to hold it together, even as the bloodline splintered around him. In those weeks, he spoke like a man who believed Roman would walk through the curtain any second and restore order. He dropped subtle hints. He'd reference our tribal chief in promos. He'd hold back tears in backstage segments, framing himself as the loyal servant. But loyalty in words is not loyalty in action. And that's what Roman saw. While Paul played the part of the faithful second-in-command, he was also trying to survive. Aligning himself with Solo. Keeping Jimmy relevant. Managing without leading. It was obvious to everyone watching that Heyman wasn't calling the shots anymore. He was patching leaks in a sinking ship. What he didn't realize was this: in Roman's absence, you're either maintaining the kingdom or you're letting it rot. And from Roman's point of view, Paul let it rot. It was in the hesitation. The way Heyman's voice cracked when referencing Roman's name. The way he allowed Jimmy to speak out of turn. The way he didn't shut down Solo's cold, methodical power plays. Paul Heyman became a relic. A symbol of what the bloodline used to be. No longer the architect, just the keeper of a broken myth. But he kept pretending. Pretending that Roman would come back and thank him. Pretending that everything was still under control. Pretending that he mattered. And when Roman finally did return, Heyman's face told the story. At first, joy. Then confusion. Then dread. He tried to speak. He tried to welcome Roman back. He reached out, physically, emotionally, thinking that years of loyalty would mean something. But Roman's expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. Because for him, Heyman's loyalty had a time limit. And it had expired. Heyman's greatest strength has always been his voice. But in that moment, it failed him. No promo. No plea. Just terror. And that's when it all snapped. Roman attacked him, not with flash, not with a promo war, but with pure, calculated violence. The way a lion might strike down the one in the pride that limped too long. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was business. The business of blood. The symbolism was hard to miss. The man who spoke Roman into power was silenced. The man who once held up titles now lay face down in the dirt, forgotten. And the message to the rest of the bloodline? Crystal clear. If Paul Heyman, the wise man, the loyal one, the mythmaker, if he could be brutalized like that, no one is safe. Heyman is more than a character. He's an institution. He's seen every era of WWE rise and fall. But this? This was different. He wasn't caught in a storyline. He was caught in a purge. And purges don't care about past service. They care about present value. And in Roman's eyes, Heyman had none left. What makes this betrayal even more chilling is the history. Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns made each other. Without Heyman's words, Roman may never have evolved into the figure who reigned over WWE for 1,316 days. Without Roman's presence, Heyman would have faded into legacy status. They were inseparable. Until they weren't. And that's the tragedy. Heyman thought his history with Roman would protect him. That their years of dominance would mean something. That Roman's return would be a resurrection, not a reckoning. But Roman Reigns isn't sentimental. He's surgical. And now, the man who once spoke of generational dominance finds himself irrelevant. Stripped of power. Abandoned by the bloodline. Unprotected. Alone. In WWE, there are two kinds of people, the ones who walk beside power, and the ones who get crushed by it. Paul Heyman has officially joined the second group. What happens next is unclear. Will Heyman return with vengeance? Will he disappear into silence? Or will he seek redemption from the very man who destroyed him? One thing is certain. The wise man wasn't wise enough. And Roman Reigns just reminded the world why he doesn't need an advocate. He speaks through destruction. For over 3 years, the bloodline wasn't just a faction. It was a fortress. A dynasty of power, intimidation, and precision. Led by Roman Reigns, fueled by fear, and protected by loyalty, the bloodline steamrolled over every threat in its path. Championships stacked, enemies fallen, and dominance undisputed. But the problem with building empires on fear is that once the king vanishes, everything underneath starts to rot. Roman Reigns disappeared. No warning. No farewell. And in his absence, the foundation cracked, quietly at first, then violently. The first signs weren't dramatic. No one turned overnight. No chairs were swung. It began with body language. A hesitation in Jimmy Uso's voice. Solo Sikoa taking just a second too long to follow Heyman's commands. Paul Heyman no longer walking tall, but shuffling, uncertain. It wasn't betrayal. It was drift. And in an empire like the bloodline, even a small drift can become a deadly fracture. Jimmy Uso tried to lead. That was his first mistake. The bloodline always functioned with one voice, one authority. Roman didn't ask. He commanded. And when Jimmy started issuing orders, trying to fill the vacuum, it didn't carry the same weight. His confidence wasn't earned, it was borrowed. The locker room felt it. The audience felt it. And worst of all, Solo felt it. Solo Sikoa is a different breed. Quiet. Calculating. Not loyal to words, but to power. And he could smell the weakness on Jimmy. Solo didn't rebel, not right away. He let things unravel. He watched Heyman scramble. He let Jimmy posture. And then, slowly, he began doing what he wanted, no permission asked. Matches Solo wasn't scheduled for? He inserted himself. People Heyman told him to protect? He let them fall. Challenges Jimmy declined? Solo accepted them. And every time he moved, you could see the line in the sand growing wider. At first, Heyman tried to keep things together. He begged Solo to be patient. He tried to coach Jimmy into confidence. But it was like taping broken glass. No matter how carefully he handled it, the pieces kept slipping apart. And the fans? They watched it happen in real time. The Bloodline, once unbeatable, started losing matches they would have dominated months earlier. Promo segments dragged. The chemistry was gone. They weren't a machine anymore. They were just a name, and everyone could tell. The most telling moment came on an episode of SmackDown when Jimmy attempted to rally the group after a tag team loss. He grabbed a mic, tried to channel Roman's gravitas, and told the world the Bloodline was still running the yard. Solo didn't say a word. He just walked out of the ring. No argument. No drama. Just silence. But that silence was everything. That's when it became clear, Solo wasn't listening anymore. He wasn't rebelling. He was ignoring. Because to Solo, Roman was the only one worth following. And Roman was gone. This wasn't a mutiny. It was a vacuum. And vacuums always pull in something darker. In the weeks that followed, Solo began operating independently. He showed up backstage without the rest of the Bloodline. He stopped tagging with Jimmy. He attacked opponents after the bell. He stared down Heyman in promos. And every move he made said the same thing, I don't need you. Heyman tried damage control. He cut impassioned promos about holding the line until Roman returns. He pleaded with Solo on camera and likely off it. But the cracks had become fault lines. There was no unity left, just fragments orbiting the memory of a leader no one had heard from. Meanwhile, the rest of the locker room took notice. Enemies of the Bloodline started circling. Seth Rollins made subtle jabs. LA Knight, Bobby Lashley, even Kevin Owens, all of them smelled the decay. And when predators sense weakness, they don't wait. They strike. But the Bloodline wasn't just under attack from outside. Inside, the tension began to twist. Jimmy, desperate to regain control, started making riskier moves. Interrupting matches he wasn't involved in. Starting fights backstage. Forcing confrontations with other factions. It wasn't strategy. It was desperation. Solo didn't stop him. He let Jimmy spiral. Why? Because Solo was done protecting anyone but himself. One night, in a tag match gone wrong, Jimmy reached for a tag and Solo walked away from the apron. Left him hanging. Left him to get pinned. After the match, he didn't explain. Didn't flinch. He just looked down at Jimmy and walked up the ramp alone. That wasn't defiance. It was declaration. The Bloodline, as it was, no longer existed. It had become a name with no meaning. A family with no leadership. A throne with no king. And yet, even in that chaos, no one truly believed Roman was gone for good. Everyone backstage knew something was coming. They just didn't know when, or how hard. The question that haunted Heyman wasn't if Roman was watching, but how much he had seen. Because if Roman saw the drift, the infighting, the cowardice, Then someone had to pay for that. And Heyman? He was the last one trying to hold the pieces together. But in Roman's world, trying isn't enough. Results matter. Strength matters. And Heyman, for all his history and all his words, had no results. The empire collapsed on his watch. When Roman returned, he didn't attack Jimmy. He didn't confront Solo. He went for Heyman. Because a king doesn't punish pawns. He punishes the generals who failed him. And that's the cruel irony. Heyman never betrayed Roman directly. He never turned his back, never sided with another faction. But he let the bloodline bleed out in public. He watched it crumble. And in the end, Roman held him responsible. The bloodline's collapse wasn't a single moment. It was erosion. The kind that eats from within. And by the time Roman returned, there wasn't a family left. Just ruins. But ruins can be rebuilt. And if Roman's first act back was to destroy his most trusted voice, then his next move might be to burn the rest of the structure to the ground. Solo Sikoa may think he's in control. Jimmy Uso might believe he's safe. But if Roman came for Heyman first, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. This isn't the fall of the bloodline. It's the cleansing before the resurrection. And the bodies will keep falling, until Roman decides who's worthy to rise. It didn't start with a countdown. It didn't start with a graphic. It didn't even start with theme music. That's how you know this wasn't scripted. This wasn't part of the night's format sheet. This wasn't WWE storytelling in its usual form. This was a ghost walking through the back door of a church he used to burn. And his name was Roman Reigns. June 7th. SmackDown. Philadelphia. The night was supposed to feature a contract signing, a six-man tag, and a possible Money in the Bank qualifier. Nothing special on paper. No teased return. Not even a backstage rumor. The show was rolling along, business as usual. Commentary was doing what commentary does, hyping the next match, selling the drama, keeping the gears turning. And then it happened. In the middle of a routine segment, the camera, unprompted, cut to a wide crowd shot. The kind of cut that's usually reserved for capturing excitement. But this one didn't catch a chant or a pop. It caught a wave of confusion, then disbelief, then chaos. No music hit. There was no Titantron animation. Just Roman Reigns, walking through the crowd, hoodie up, dead silent, head down like a man walking toward Judgment Day, with the crowd parting for him like water splitting around a stone. The arena shifted. You could feel it. Physically. Like the temperature dropped. People didn't cheer. They held their breath. Because the last time anyone saw Roman Reigns, he was a broken god limping away from WrestleMania. And now he was back, and he wasn't smiling. The cameraman didn't know what to do. You could see it. The lens shook for a second, like someone had kicked it. The director hesitated. No one wanted to go full screen. It wasn't planned. And that made it perfect. Roman didn't run. He didn't posture. He walked. Straight down the steps. Right toward the ring. Right toward Paul Heyman. Inside the ring, Heyman was mid-sentence. Trying to sell the audience on the bloodline still being a thing. Still worth fearing. Still worth respecting. Jimmy stood at ringside. Solo wasn't there, because even Solo wouldn't have stood between Roman and whoever was at the end of his line of sight. And then Heyman saw him. The switch in his face was immediate. Eyes widened. Mouth opened slightly. The mic lowered. Then came the hand. That hand, the same one he used to gesture toward Roman in every introduction. My name is Paul Heyman, and I serve as special counsel to the reigning, defending, but this wasn't a promo. This was a plea. Roman didn't react. He stepped over the barricade. Slid into the ring. Stood. No pyro. No posing. No pyro. Just presence. He looked down at Heyman like someone inspecting something that used to have value. The moment lasted maybe 8 seconds. Heyman spoke first, of course. It's what he does. He tried to explain. No sound came through. Roman moved. And that's when the fear began. This wasn't a spear to end a promo kind of attack. This wasn't build heat for SummerSlam. This was execution. Roman reached forward, not for a handshake, not even for a clothesline. He grabbed Heyman by the suit jacket, pulled him in like dead weight, and slammed him to the canvas. The crowd gasped. The commentary team went silent. Heyman bounced. Not like a wrestler taking a bump. Like a man hitting the floor who doesn't know how to land. Roman didn't stop. He lifted Heyman again. Another shot. Turned his back. Then a sudden pivot, and a thunderous spear that flattened Heyman to the point where the referee sprinted in from the back without a match even scheduled. Medical rushed out. Jimmy backed away instinctively. The camera caught it. He didn't even roll into the ring to help. He just took a few steps back and watched. Like he knew that stepping between Roman and his target would have made him next. The attack went on for 3 more minutes. No music. No commentary. Just the sound of Roman breathing heavy and Heyman groaning between gasps. Another slam. A set of steel steps. And finally, Roman rolling out of the ring, lifting the top half of the announce table, and slamming it down next to Heyman's crumpled frame, not on him, next to him. It was a warning shot. Then, Roman turned to the hard cam. Stared. For 5 full seconds. Then left. No catchphrase. No promo. No message. And somehow, that said more than any monologue ever could. Because Roman Reigns, in that moment, wasn't reclaiming a throne. He was issuing a death sentence. The bloodline had failed him. And Heyman was the first on the altar. What happened in that ring didn't feel like a segment. It felt like a hit. Like something that belonged on a criminal case file, not a wrestling highlight reel. And fans felt that. On Twitter, #Roman returned shot to #1 in under 8 minutes. Not because he came back with a new entrance or stared down a rival. Because people weren't sure what they just saw. Was it planned? Was it scripted? Even in the world of kayfabe, that moment blurred the line hard. That's the power Roman brought back with him. In the hours that followed, the footage was rewatched millions of times. In slow motion. In screen grabs. In shaky fancam clips from the balcony. YouTube channels that usually did match reviews dropped everything and uploaded breaking. Roman Reigns destroys Paul Heyman, what does it mean? Podcasters scrambled to go live. WWE superstars tweeted cryptic emojis. A few deleted their responses entirely after just a few minutes. No one wanted to be seen as choosing sides yet. Because here's what was obvious to everyone watching, Roman didn't return to reunite the bloodline. He returned to purge it. The message wasn't, I'm back. The message was, I've been watching. And if that's how Roman handles his Wiseman, his most loyal servant, then what's coming for Jimmy? For Solo? For Cody? What happens when the god comes back not to lead, but to punish? In that ring, for those 4 minutes, Roman wasn't a wrestler. He was judgment. He was silence made flesh. He was the long shadow behind every bad decision the bloodline made while he was gone. And now he's not gone anymore. So whatever's left of the bloodline better find a way to become something new, or get out of the way. Because when Roman Reigns returned, he didn't walk through the curtain like a star. He walked through it like a sentence being carried out. And no one saw it coming. It wasn't a match. It wasn't even an ambush. It was a beating. A real one. The kind that makes you uncomfortable watching it. The kind that makes you forget, for a few minutes, That what you're seeing is part of a wrestling show and not something far more violent and real. What Roman Reigns did to Paul Heyman wasn't about a storyline. It wasn't entertainment. It was punishment. And it started the second he stepped into the ring. Roman didn't posture. He didn't raise a fist for the crowd. He didn't glance around to soak in the moment. He didn't even blink. He looked at Paul Heyman like he wasn't a man anymore. He was a mistake. The kind you fix by force. And Paul? He knew what was coming. You could see it in his face. He didn't even try to run. That's the part that broke people watching. He just stood there. Open hands. Small movements. Pleading. Whispering something. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was a prayer. Roman didn't listen. He struck. Not with a slap. Not with a punch. He grabbed Heyman and drove him into the mat like someone trying to erase history. You could feel the sound before you even heard it. Like the ring gasped. Like the crowd couldn't decide whether to cheer or be horrified. This wasn't the Roman who smirked before delivering a Superman punch. This wasn't the Roman who toyed with opponents in a title match. This was something deeper. Something personal. And it was just the beginning. Roman yanked Heyman up by the jacket, his hands clenched so tight the lapels tore slightly. No wasted movement. Just violence. He drove his shoulder into Heyman's midsection with a thud. A controlled burst. Not flashy, just painful. He pulled him into a corner and smashed his head into the top turnbuckle. Over and over. 7 times. Maybe more. And then he let Heyman drop. Face first. Arms slack. Breathing heavy. But Roman didn't stop. He walked out of the ring, calm, collected, and flipped the apron. He didn't throw chairs like a man out of control. He pulled out the steel steps methodically, like a craftsman choosing the right tool. He slid them into the ring. Slowly. Climbed back in. And that's when it got worse. The steps weren't used for a quick slam. Roman lifted Paul Heyman, barely conscious, and dropped him with a Samoan drop directly across the edge of the steps. The sound it made didn't echo like usual. It was dull. Real. Like something breaking. Heyman didn't move after that. Not a twitch. His legs didn't flail. His arms didn't protect his face. His body went limp. And Roman? He stared down at him. No rage. No screaming. Just cold. Calculated. Disgust. It was the kind of look someone gives a problem they've just solved permanently. Commentary didn't even try to spin it. They went quiet. Because what do you say? What line do you drop when a man is laid out in front of the world by someone he once called his tribal chief? There was no storyline here. Just retribution. The camera zoomed in tight. You could see the spit on Roman's chin. You could see Heyman's eyes fluttering like a man drifting in and out of consciousness. You could see the ringside medic motioning toward the back for more help. And still, Roman stood over him. Unmoving. Like a judge watching a sentence carried out. For a moment, it looked like it was over. But then Roman bent down. He didn't shout. He whispered. We'll never know what he said. The camera caught the movement of his lips, but no audio. Whatever it was, Heyman heard it. His eyes widened just a little. Enough to know that Roman wasn't done. Not yet. Roman picked him up again. Not gently. This wasn't mercy. He locked his arms around Heyman's torso and delivered the second spear. And this one was worse. The first was a message. This one was a signature. It folded Heyman in half. And for a moment, the entire crowd gasped like they just watched something they weren't supposed to see. A few fans near the barricade turned their heads. Others shouted, not in excitement, but in fear. Because this wasn't just a man attacking another man. This was a king executing a traitor. And the worst part? No one moved to help. No Jimmy Uso. No Solo. No referees until the very end. They all stood back and watched. Because they knew. Trying to stop Roman Reigns in that moment would have been suicide. He wasn't in control. He was control. Eventually, the bell rang, not for a match, but for order. Security came down. Trainers rushed in. Roman stepped back, finally. Not because they stopped him. But because he was done. And then he did something no one expected. He picked up the microphone. Not to cut a promo. Not to address the crowd. He looked down at Heyman, gasping, battered, barely conscious, and dropped the mic onto his chest. That was the punctuation mark. He didn't say a word into it. Because everything he needed to say had already been said, with fists, with steel, with silence. Then Roman turned. Walked out of the ring. Up the ramp. No music played. No commentary wrapped the moment. It ended the way it started. Quiet. Unsettling. Final. In the hours that followed, WWE went dark on the moment. They didn't post the clip immediately. They didn't release backstage photos. No interviews. No backstage reaction segments. Even the official social accounts only tweeted one thing: Roman Reigns has returned. That's it. No mention of Paul Heyman. No statement on his condition. And that silence said everything. The Bloodline story didn't get a new chapter. It got an obituary. And Paul Heyman was the one buried first. Backstage sources wouldn't confirm whether the beatdown was part of a new arc or the result of internal friction. But one insider said off the record, "We've never seen Roman like that." That wasn't acting. That was a man who's been watching everything, waiting. And he snapped. Some fans started calling it the crucifixion, not for religious imagery, but because it felt ritualistic. Deliberate. Necessary in Roman's mind. Others compared it to mafia justice. Quiet, clean, devastating. But no one denied its impact. That night, something shifted. Not in WWE's booking plans. In the fans. Because when your most trusted voice, the man who stood beside Brock Lesnar for a decade, who helped build the tribal chief, who shaped modern WWE narrative, gets brutalized like that, it tells you that the old rules are gone. It's not about alliances anymore. It's not about gold. It's not even about family. It's about power. And Roman Reigns just reminded everyone that he still holds it. With no music. No words. Just pain. WWE fans are known for being loud. It's part of the culture. The chants. The boos. The spontaneous crowd waves. Entire matches rise and fall on the energy pulsing out from the seats. But when Roman Reigns destroyed Paul Heyman, the loudest sound in the arena wasn't a cheer or a chant. It was nothing. Silence. There were no "this is awesome" chants. No crowd pops. Just a sharp gasp when Roman hit that first spear, and then, nothing but stunned faces and hands over mouths. You could see it in the front row. A dad with his son? Eyes wide. Teenagers on their feet? Dead quiet. Even the regulars, the fans who know every beat of WWE storytelling, had the same expression. Disbelief. Not because Roman came back. But because of how he came back. WWE returns are usually celebrated. They're structured. Music hits, the lights strobe, and fans rise to their feet in anticipation. The camera cuts to a wide shot. The wrestler hits a catchphrase. It's magic. It's sports entertainment at its best. This was not that. This was raw. No lights. No sound. No nostalgia. Roman walked through the crowd like a curse being delivered in real time. And no one knew how to react. The arena became part of the scene, frozen in real, uncoached awe. And then the attack happened, and everything changed. Phones were out, sure. People filmed. That's habit now. But even behind the camera screens, you could tell people weren't filming for clout. They were filming because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Like they needed proof later to show themselves it really happened. The fan footage went viral within minutes. One video from Section 115 captured the entire beatdown from a side angle. It got 2.8 million views in the first hour. Another fan, from the balcony, posted a shaky zoom-in of Roman slamming Heyman onto the steel steps. The caption, "This isn't wrestling anymore. This is something else." And that's how it felt. The attack transcended kayfabe. It wasn't sold like a moment in a feud, it was felt like something had gone horribly wrong. Social media exploded. The top comment on WWE's post that night didn't celebrate the return. It asked, "Did we just watch the end of Paul Heyman?" On Twitter, Roman trended globally within 12 minutes. But the tone wasn't celebratory. It was shaken. One user wrote, "I'm a grown man and I flinched when that second spear landed." Another, "I don't know if I'm supposed to cheer this or be scared. Because Roman just took out the one guy who never betrayed him." And this, "I'm sorry but that didn't feel like a segment. That felt like an execution." Even WWE personalities broke script. Kevin Owens tweeted a single word, "Damn." Then deleted it. Carmelo Hayes posted a black and white still of Heyman post-beatdown. No caption. Booker T, during a post-show panel, paused for a moment before offering commentary. "That wasn't wrestling," he finally said. "That was something deeper. That was a message to everybody in that locker room." Podcasts that typically wait until the next morning scrambled to go live that night. YouTube lit up with emergency reaction streams. One host opened his live show with, "Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed a murder." I don't know what else to call it. But it wasn't just online. Inside the arena, fans lingered longer than usual after the show. Not just to buy merch or beat traffic. They stayed because it didn't feel over. Like something else could happen. Like Roman might come back out. People walked out of the arena whispering, not shouting. Not because they didn't care. Because they didn't know what to say. Parents held their kids' hands a little tighter. Friends argued about what it meant. Some speculated it was a double turn. Others said Roman was always the villain. But the consensus was this: something changed. And maybe permanently. There are WWE moments you remember for spectacle, like The Rock returning, or Cena's surprise entrance at the Rumble. Then there are moments you remember because they hit differently. Like when Undertaker lost at WrestleMania. Or when Seth Rollins broke up the Shield. This was that kind of moment. But darker. More personal. More violent. Because Roman didn't just break Heyman's body. He shattered a bond. And fans felt that. The wise man wasn't just a character. He was a constant. He was always there. Through Brock. Through CM Punk. Through every shift in WWE's landscape, Heyman was the connective tissue. So, when Roman, his final client, his magnum opus, turned on him like that, it broke something bigger than the bloodline. It broke the illusion of safety. If Heyman isn't safe, who is? The fans' reaction proved it. They didn't chant Roman. They didn't chant bloodline. They were quiet. Because the greatest trick Roman Reigns ever pulled was convincing people he needed Heyman. And now, without a word, he reminded everyone, he never did. The arena emptied, but the damage lingered. Roman Reigns had walked out. Paul Heyman had been carried out. And WWE, on air, backstage, and across every inch of its corporate structure, was left scrambling to figure out what just happened, and what the hell to do about it. There was no press release. No post-show statement. Not even a post-credits interview. Usually, WWE wastes no time capitalizing on big moments. They spin up teaser trailers. They post exclusive interviews. They pump out content like a news factory. But this time, silence. And that silence wasn't scripted. It was real. Because Roman's return wasn't just unexpected, it wasn't authorized. At least, not by the storyline logic the company had been building toward. The creative team had already laid groundwork for Solo Sikoa to emerge as a dominant force. There were whispers of Jimmy stepping back, Heyman holding it all together just long enough for something fresh to emerge at SummerSlam. Internally, that was the vision, an evolution of the Bloodline, not its destruction. Roman's return detonated that vision. He didn't just walk back into the spotlight, he burned the entire lighting rig. And no one backstage knew how to follow it. Multiple reports from talent sources said the locker room that night was dead silent after the show ended. Not just because of the segment, but because everyone knew it was real. Roman's decision to attack Heyman in such a brutal, unscripted feeling way created chaos in the pecking order. Because Roman returning means something bigger than just a storyline shift. It means the power structure is back in motion. And Roman doesn't share power. He asserts it. Within hours, questions swirled. Is Roman back full-time? Is this a limited run? Is this the start of a Bloodline reboot, or the beginning of its end? What happens to Heyman? Who runs the faction now, if anyone? Talent started asking around, but no one had answers. Not even the producers. Not even Heyman himself. He didn't return backstage after the segment. He was taken to a local facility, per WWE officials, for evaluation. He didn't text anyone. No update. Not even a thank you to talent who messaged him. And that radio silence turned the locker room anxious. Because if Heyman, the man who's seen everything, was too stunned to speak, then maybe something deeper was at play. The Monday following the attack, Raw opened with no mention of Roman. Not in the cold open, not in the commentary. Instead, they focused on a pre-scheduled match and Cody Rhodes promo. But during Cody's segment, there was a beat. He looked off camera, as if distracted. The fans knew. They chanted Roman. Roman. Not out of celebration. But as if daring him to show up again. He didn't. But backstage, the message was already delivered. The top of the food chain just came back, and he came back hunting. For the rest of the week, SmackDown's production team debated how to handle the fallout. Do they show replays of the beatdown? Do they build story around it? Ultimately, they aired a viewer discretion advised recap package at the top of the show. But even that edit pulled punches. They cut away from the second spear. They muted the sound of the steel steps impact. They never showed Heyman being stretchered out. The message was clear, this wasn't for laughs. This wasn't part of the usual arc. This was a warning. And the rest of the roster understood that warning loud and clear. From a business perspective, Roman's return lit the metrics on fire. Merch sales spiked, despite no new product. WWE.com's traffic doubled within 6 hours. And internal analytics showed one word trending across all digital platforms: Unforgiven. No catchphrases. No faction names. Just one feeling. By midweek, creative meetings were cancelled and restructured. Talent with planned feuds were told to remain flexible. Solo Sikoa was pulled from a scheduled live promo. Jimmy was removed from a dark match. Multiple agents said, off the record, that all scripts were subject to Roman. Because now, Roman was the script. And Heyman's absence didn't go unnoticed. No tweets. No backstage appearances. No interviews. Just silence. That silence got louder as the days passed. Because Paul Heyman never stays quiet. Even after Lesnar broke the streak at WrestleMania, Heyman was back the next night, gloating. But after Roman's assault? Nothing. Some believed he was too injured. Others whispered it was emotional. That Roman's betrayal didn't just hurt physically, it humiliated him. Publicly. In front of the industry he helped shape. In an era of cameras, microphones, hot mics, and leaks, Paul Heyman became a ghost. And that ghost haunted everything. Backstage morale dipped. Young talent, once excited about being in the Bloodline orbit, now wanted distance. Because if Roman could erase Paul Heyman in 4 minutes flat, what chance did anyone else have? One veteran star put it bluntly, Roman just reminded everyone that this is his yard. Not because he said it, but because he acted like it. WWE officials remained tight-lipped. There was no update to Roman's status page on the roster site. No clarification about whether he's active. Just a photo. One still shot. Roman, walking up the ramp after the attack. No caption. They didn't need one. The Bloodline brand wasn't just injured. It was on trial. And Roman Reigns was both judge and executioner. SmackDown's closing segment that week tried to recenter the narrative. Jimmy came to the ring. He had a mic. He said he was shocked by Roman's actions. He called the attack unnecessary. He said Paul didn't deserve it. But the audience didn't respond. They weren't booing. They were just watching. Waiting. Because what Jimmy said didn't matter. They were waiting to see if Roman would show up again. He didn't. Not that week. But his absence this time felt different. It wasn't a disappearance. It was presence through threat. The same way thunder doesn't need to strike twice to remind you it's nearby. Everyone was moving more cautiously now. Matches were booked, but with disclaimers. Promos were cut, but with deference. And Paul Heyman? Still gone. No new footage. No recovery updates. Just a memory now. And that's exactly what Roman wanted. The entire WWE universe, on air, backstage, and across the globe, felt it. Roman didn't just return. He reset the rules. And in real time, every superstar, announcer, producer, and fan is adjusting to those rules, whether they like it or not.